Look at any major European port right now, you'll see the same thing. Massive American gas tankers lining up to unload their cargo. It looks like energy security, but it's really dependence, just with a new logo on the side of the ship. So this is a really interesting topic. I'm sure you're going to enjoy this. Let's jump into it. It's also a little bit different to my normal videos, but it's very related. Hello folks, Ben Alexander here. Thank you so much for tuning in. I really appreciate your time. I don't take it for granted that all these, thousands and thousands of people watch my videos every day. Thank you so much. I really do appreciate that. So here's what's happening. Over the past few years, the United States spent more than $100 billion building new LNG export terminals. Europe bought every shipload it could, desperate to replace Russian gas, and on paper it worked. The lights stayed on. Factories kept running. But there is a catch. Europe has quietly been using every one of those cargoes to fund its escape from imported fuel together. Instead of locking in decades of LNG imports, they now are building thousands of kilometers of new pipelines, not to America, but to connect it directly with neighboring countries and new renewable hubs. Bit of an interesting thing. Obviously, you should be thinking about why they would not be simply focusing on solar energy and wind and some other things that we could do. So basically, each tanker that unloads today is, in a sense, paying for the infrastructure that will make the next tanker unnecessary. It's a really weird thing we've got going on at the minute in Europe. That's the fossil fuel trap. You think you're buying security, but you're actually buying dependence that lasts half a lifetime. So once a pipeline's in the ground, you're committed to, for 30, 40, 50, 60 years. You don't own your energy. You're kind of renting it in the sort of weird ways. It's a strange way of looking at it. Now here's where it gets interesting for all of us watching the clean energy transition. Solar and wind flip that model completely. So this is something that's obviously manipulating the politicians in Europe, basically. They turn energy from something that you import to something that you produce. You don't need a supertanker or a government deal. You need wind. We've got that. Sunlight and a local grid that can store whatever it is that you make, and that's the power of electrification. It's not just clean, it's also local. I know there's a lot of things in society where we often think, in, say, for example, the UK. I remember hearing about this in the UK years ago. Somebody said on a public interview, why do we give all this money away to buy Polish coal, burn it, when we've got more wind than any other country in Europe, basically. Interesting thing to talk about, isn't it? So think about this. The typical LNG supply chain adds around maybe 30% of the cost of every kilowatt hour just through shipping, chilling, regasification. A solar farm or rooftop array skips all of that. Once it's up, or the fuel is free, and the payback period in most of Europe and Australia is now 5 to 8 years roughly. After that, it's decades of low cost power. So there are complexities obviously to make the grid kind of not fluctuate very much, because we need a very stable grid. Obviously this is something that the people that run the power stations, they're all very familiar with this. So if you just use wind turbines, it's quite complex. You do need to sort of make sure that it's very, very stable. Every kilowatt that you generate locally is money that stays in your town instead of flowing overseas. Obviously, this applies in many areas of life. Like if you live in a little village and you've got a big company, like in Australia, there are little villages with supermarkets such as Coles. Every time you give $20 to Coles, your village will never see that again. It's a one-way out of the village. Bit of a weird thing. Same with electricity, when we buy electricity and the way that it's produced. So if you've got a home with batteries on it, or even if an EV in the driveway, you're part of that same system, producing, storing and using your energy. So fossil infrastructure centralizes control. Electrification distributes it. So when you buy LNG, you're betting your economy on global shipping lanes, politics and price swings. Obviously, we've found this out in the last 5 or 6 years, haven't we? Yeah, I don't need to go any further than that. We all kind of know what I'm talking about. When you build solar or wind, you're insulating yourself from all of that. You're literally taking back power. And the economic ripple effect from this is huge. Councils running community solar projects keep revenue local. Small businesses cut one of their biggest costs, energy. Families get predictable bills instead of shock increases. That's resilience. That's not just sustainability. So yeah, if we're honest, some governments still see gas pipelines as security, but real security doesn't come from a contract signed in another country. It comes from panels on your roof and turbines on your coastline. They don't need a tanker. They don't need a ship schedule. They're already here. They're going to produce some electricity tomorrow unless you turn off the switch, and they don't care about geopolitical drama or anything like that. So look at what's happening right now. Obviously, Europe is building more interconnectors for renewables. Asia is signing long-term deals for gas, and the United States is doubling down on exports. But the real quiet revolution is happening at ground level: rooftops, local grids, and battery farms. So that is the stuff that actually frees people from the fossil fuel roller coaster, obviously. And if you think about it, the story is familiar. It's the same as what we've seen in cars. The legacy players doubled down on engines and exhausts, while the new wave went electric, obviously. And even though, to be fair, Toyota are making record profits right now, and they're obsessed with their hybrids. And they make decent hybrids, but they're making more money than they've ever made before. So, solar and wind are the EVs of the power world. Clean, modular, improving every single year. Pipelines and tankers, they're the petrol engines, efficient in their day, already relics of a world that we can't keep fueling. So unless we use a lot more biofuels or something like that, which is quite expensive and not really sustainable at the minute, but I really would like to think for classic cars and things like that, we do come up with a solution so we don't have to sack them off and never drive them. It'd be a shame if we couldn't have these beautiful old classic cars from the 30s or 40s in Europe, and if we could never use them because we couldn't purchase any petrol or something. So I'm sure we'll figure that out in the future. We'll just get big tins of biofuel. So when someone says we need energy security, maybe ask, whose security? A multinationals or yours? Because the real answer isn't at the port, it's on your roof. It's in the grid down the road, and it's spinning quietly on a windy hill nearby. This is the deal, isn't it? That's the local power revolution. And once it scales, it doesn't just cut emissions, it changes who controls energy altogether. What do you think? This is a very loaded topic, I know, but it is also something that we need to talk about. So would you rather see your own community own its own generation, having power stations down the roads, even if every rural town in Australia, if you had massive solar panels and things like that, and you could buy lots of cheap power and you could have community projects, something like that, it would be brilliant, wouldn't it? Or would you rather keep paying for imported energy that locks us in Europe, for example, for the next 40, 50 years? Let me know in the comments down below, and I read obviously as many comments as I can, but there are too many usually. But if you're a member of the channel for a couple of dollars a month, you get priority, so you get put to the top of the list, and I read those and I see them also. Thank you so much for watching. Feel free to subscribe, and yeah, I really appreciate it.